Dr. Lisle, and welcome to the Real Truth About Weight Loss Summit. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, AJ.
Great. Well, Dr. Lisle, so many of our experts have talked about what the best diet is for weight loss, and they've all agreed that it's a whole food plant-based diet, unprocessed, free of oil, and either none or minimal amounts of sugar and salt. So a lot of people already know what to do, but they're not doing it. So what is the fundamental challenge that people experience when trying to lose weight?
Well, the first challenge they have is when they have these arguments with their friends. Like I had an argument with Dr. Goldhammer about whether you can add a little bit of sugar or salt to the food, and the argument got heated, and then this is what happened. All right. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about a few fundamental misconceptions. People are looking for usually a few secrets to how it is that they're going to translate healthy intentions into healthy action. And the most important principle to understand here is going to be energy conservation. So energy conservation is, there's actually two constraining resources for life on planet Earth, and ostensibly anywhere in the universe. And that's going to be time and energy. So we've all heard about these as kids, you know, as adults have complained about time and energy, I'm out of time or energy. But not too many people have ever thought deeply about the notion that time and energy are literally the two constraining resources on life. Okay, so you only have so much time to do so many things before you pass away. And you only have so much energy within that time to take the actions needed to be a successful biological entity, which in that case would be survival and reproductive process. So what animal brains are is they're actually computers that are designed in order to optimally use time and energy. That's what a brain is. And so brains of animals and people have extremely sophisticated systems in order to help them utilize their time and energy wisely. Let me give you an example of the use of time and energy. So let's suppose that I am an elephant seal and I'm a young male elephant seal. I'm not quite as big and strong as Alpha. And so I know that Alpha is older than I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep eating fish and I'm going to kind of wrestle around with my buddies, but I'm not ever going to take on Alpha, not until Alpha is either injured or whether or not I get bigger and stronger than Alpha. So I will know that I've got a time advantage on this guy, that he's aging and he's likely to get beat up in some other fight. So I'm going to essentially take my time and use it wisely. If you didn't have a clock in your head put in by biology to tell you essentially how to play the game of life, you wouldn't know how to play it. So you have to have some sense that your time is constrained, and you have to know about how it's constrained. And then from within those time constraints, what you do is you use your energy. So one thing that goes on with weight loss and weight issues, AJ, is that people fiddle around because they know they still have time. Okay, so they know I can still get there. I can still get my attractiveness back to where it was. And so they'll do a lot of procrastinating on this issue behind the notion that they've still got time, interestingly enough. Now energy is the other constraint. So what animals do is they move. And so they move in ways that are optimal for their biological success. So they're designed by nature to figure out how it is. So this guy doesn't just swim around in the ocean and turn flips all day long. That's not what he does. He actually moves with very concerted planning. And that concerted planning that animals do to move. So a gopher doesn't decide to try to climb a tree. Gopher's going to burrow into the ground because that's going to be the smartest move for a gopher. So what creatures do is they actually have a plan for their movements, and that's going to be what we call motivation. So animals don't just move randomly, they move with motives. And those motives involve a target action, something that they want to accomplish. And when they hit a target action, they're going to have a reward for it because that's going to be good for their biology. And one way or the other, they're going to win. They're going to beat Alpha, win the females. They're going to get a hole dug so that they can have a den with their little critters in it. In other words, animals have motives and so do people. it's going to turn out that what people want more than anything is they're going to want what we're going to call esteem. So they want to be valued by other people. So one of the driving issue in weight loss is to be esteemed more by other people. That doesn't mean we want everybody to sleep with us or want them to want to sleep with us or anything like this or just admire us. But the truth is that we're designed by nature to essentially be in a competitive process with other people, that we want to appear fit, we want to appear as attractive as we can. These are just basic biological motives that are inside every creature in the animal kingdom, including us. And what we want to do is we're designed by nature to try to optimally use our time and energy to get there. Now, we're using our time and energy for all kinds of motives. Getting the kids to school, getting the oil changed in the car. Some of us are more diligent than others at these things. Going and getting our hair cut, having a fight with our friend about whether or not there should be sugar and salt on the food. There's sort of no end to human agendas. So if we look at anybody's life, their life's pretty complicated and they have a whole bunch of different goals. And getting your kid to school, you actually don't know this consciously, but what you're attempting to do is you're attempting to aid your own biological success through the process of them getting to school on time, getting their homework done, doing well in school, getting good grades. Then they can maybe, get better job in high school. And then maybe at the end of high school, they go to a good college. If they go to a good college and they do a good job and have good habits, maybe they get a good job. They get a good job, then that puts them in a position with better finances to be more secure, to get better mates, and therefore raise your grandchildren more effectively. There's no end to it. So literally in Susie's desire to hustle little Matt and get him into the car and get him to school on time, she doesn't know it, but behind this is an entire orchestration of her life's agenda, okay, being driven by the need to be biologically successful. It's an incredible orchestration of which people are almost entirely unconscious. Now, behind all this, what we have is the energy conservation is a constant whispering dynamic that sits inside of animal minds. This is why predators throughout the world go after the weak, the sick, the slow, the isolated, and the injured. They aren't taught to do this. These are automated computational mechanisms that reside inside of predators to do this. They are ingenious at it. Okay, so they literally, out of an array of 300 possible prey animals, they'll pick the one or two that is the most likely to be compromised. This is how sophisticated animal motivation is. The motives are all about, can I save energy? Okay? So you will have heard all of your weight loss experts sort of lamenting and frustrated about how it is to get people to make the right dietary choices. The reason why it's difficult for people to make the right dietary choices is because they are designed by nature to seek out the most energy out of the food with the least possible effort. That means they're designed by nature to approach food and remember which food has the most calories per square inch or per pound. Okay, so that's what we call calorie density. So of course, the motivational systems, which in this case is going to be driven by pleasure mechanisms, the motivational systems are going to be designed by nature to not only have you be able to smell when the food is higher calorie density before you've ever tasted it, but also once you've tasted it, to enjoy it more than food is of lower calorie density. And not only that, to remember the specific food and have it called up in your memory circuits over the next succeeding days to try to repeat that process because it was so extremely valuable. So this is what Dr. Alan Goldhammer and I call the pleasure trap, that you are designed by nature to be constantly circling around, essentially like a vulture, always looking for the richest food in the environment. So how are we going to fix this?
May I ask a question, Dr. Lisle? Because what you said, if we really are biologically driven, designed by nature to always seek the richest food in the environment, wouldn't it make sense for somebody wanting to lose weight to not have those rich foods in their environment?
That is exactly right. So it's going to turn out, not only do you not want to have the rich foods in your environment, you also want something else. And that is that you want the healthy food in your environment that is of appropriate calorie density for our species. We want that food. We want you very good at putting that food together. So it's going to turn out that, cruelly, that the beginning is always going to be the hardest. This is how it's going to work. So if you think about the reason why this is true is you actually have to learn the orchestrated movements involved in something as simple as opening up an avocado, okay, and then taking the pit out. You don't think anything of this. This seems unbelievably simple. But if you watch an experienced cook that has done that 1,000 times do it, they are much more efficient in their movements than somebody who's just doing it for the first time. You get more efficient at cooking your oatmeal. It seems like that would be impossible that would be true, but it is true. You get more efficient at it. And the more efficient that you get at essentially producing and organizing healthy food in your environment, from the decisions that you make in terms of when you're in the grocery store, to how it is that you store the food in your refrigerator and in your kitchen, and then how you put it together. All of these issues of energy conservation, the more effective that you get at this through the more practice, what's going to happen is it starts to become the default programming of your existence. You just do it over and over again because this is going to be what we call the learning curve. Okay, so the learning curve was a concept essentially invented by Ivan Pavlov more than 100 years ago in the concept of animal learning. And so it's going to, everybody remembers Pavlov's dogs. Well, Pavlov's dogs went through a learning curve process as they learned something new. That's what learning is about. It's about learning, it's about new information and new connections. And so the new connection that Pavlov's dogs learned was that if you ring a bell, then there's going to be food. Okay, ringing a bell doesn't necessarily mean food in the animal environment at all, but it did because Pavlov educated them that that was going to be true. The same thing is going to be true for you in your own kitchen. If you don't have to be looking for things, if you've got things super well organized, if everything that you need for your week is already in the kitchen because you have a shopping list on your phone or in your head that is so simple and you know exactly what it is that you're going to do, then you're going to make it much more likely for you to be able to repeat these actions over and over. And of course, the first week that you do this, you're going to be pathetic, okay? That's how it works. This is, we can't stop this. You've been through this many times in your life. You just haven't recognized the process. So for example, this is how you learn to walk. So you didn't just learn to walk, and anybody that ever tells me, oh, my kid could just learn to walk without any problem, I know that the person is not telling the truth. And the reason they're not telling the truth is that it is required that you fall. It is required. You must actually make mistakes in order to learn when you're making a mistake, and then you get a correction process. And when your kid falls and they cry, that's an important part of the process. Okay? It's actually a way that the mind records what kind of error it just made so that it won't make that error in that degree the next time. It's the same way you learn how to talk. Okay? You babbled away and nobody could understand what you were saying, and you slowly triangulated on being able to formulate words and get them right, pretty much. All right, so this is how this works. The way you learned how to walk and the way you learned how to talk was going through the process of learning curves. And the same thing is going to be true for everything. Riding a bicycle, absolutely a treacherous process by which you had to fall a few times. You had to have that sinking feeling of that you overcorrected, and now it is that you've lost your balance. This is the learning process. And the very same learning process has to go on when it comes to changing your diet, with one exception. Remember that when you fall off a bicycle or you fall as a little kid, it hurts. All right? So the system says, careful. What you just did was you just made a mistake. When you make a mistake here, it rewards you, for God's sakes. Okay? Okay? So now we start to see the psychological challenges we have, and now we start to understand more broadly why it is that this is such a difficult process, and why we have to have educational processes, that we have to have support systems. As people have a motivation among many motivations, and one of them says, I want to be thinner, I want to be fitter, I want to get rid of my type 2 diabetes, I want to be prettier, I want to be beautiful, I want to be proud of myself, I want to just be more fit and have more energy. Those are all worthy goals, but against them, strangely enough, are the two major constraining, motivating processes in life: time and energy. Both of these constraining resources, both of them are against you. Okay? You're already up the learning curve in how it is to get rich food. And not only that, it's everywhere. Okay? It's everywhere, and it's unbelievably easy. And healthy food will never be as easy as rich food.
Right.
Literally, corporate America understands intuitively about energy conservation and time. That's what, quote, fast food is. If you notice, fast food has an interesting characteristic. Not only is it hyper palatable, in other words, it's super rich in calories, vastly richer in calories than our species was designed to eat. Our species is designed to eat food that's about 500 calories a pound, more or less. Your stomach is going to hold 4 or 5 pounds of food a day. If you're a man, you're going to burn about 2,500 calories, so you're going to need to eat on average about 5 pounds of food. If you're a woman, you're going to eat about 1,900 calories a day. It's about 4 pounds of food. So you're essentially designed by nature to eat this few pounds of food a day. You can imagine what happens is if the food that you eat on average is 1,000 calories a pound instead of 500. If you do that and you eat that same 4 or 5 pounds of food a day, we're going to be eating massive overeating in terms of caloric intake, and we're going to get people that are overweight. So if anybody wants to know why people are overweight, it's not because they eat too much food.
Right.
Okay, they're not eating too much food. They're eating the appropriate 4 pounds of food, but the food that they're eating is richer than was designed for the organism. And as a result, they're systematically overeating the calories, and that's putting extra weight on them. Now, there's two ways that the calories can be rich, artificially rich. One way is for literally the chemical density of the food to be high. So that's going to be, your other doctors will have talked about this, that it's high fat food, that's really rich, and even carbohydrate and protein. If there's not the appropriate amount of fiber along with the food, then the food is going to be calorically too rich. The other issue, though, is how soft the food is. Okay, so it turns out that when you soften food, it turns out that it requires significantly less calories to digest the food. In fact, about 12% or so. So when you take the very same food naturally, for example, let's suppose we had carrots and we put carrots into a blender and we made it into carrot soup. Now, this is not a tragedy because carrots are so low in calorie density that if we do such a thing, the fact that our soup just went up in terms of its calorie density by 12% is not a crisis because carrots are only 200 calories a pound anyway. But when you look at the modern food supply and what people are eating, what they're eating is rich food that has also been made very soft. Okay, so this is fascinating.
Like peanut butter.
Like peanut butter. A great example also would be hamburger. So there's a reason why hamburger is the national food of the United States. And that's because it turns out that, of course, when it comes to commercial ease and storage, etc., the appropriate thing would have been steak burgers. If you got a bunch of people that want to eat a bunch of animal food and they're going to eat a bunch of steak, then of course you would just slice it into chunks and put it on bread. Okay, that would be what you would do. And then you put your ketchup and your mayonnaise, and i.e. oil, all over the food, and that's what would be reasonable. But that's not what we did. What we found out is that everybody wanted to eat hamburger with cheese on it, of course. And what are we going to see there? The hamburger, because it's been ground up by a machine, it is much softer. And that softness makes it 12% more calorie dense, effectively, than had we had exactly the same amount of meat, except that it was in a steak burger. This is extraordinary. So when you look at fast food, not only is fast food designed to be fast and designed to be up the learning curve, so that you, incredibly simple learning curve. All you have to learn to do is to drive through the drive-through. Okay, that's all you have to do. I remember, as a kid, it's a little scary talking to the little guy behind the thing from the drive-through, but you get up that learning curve and you find out it's like magic. Okay, so all you have to do is talk to the guy. All right, so then you go up that learning curve, which is pretty simple, much simpler than opening up an avocado and getting the pit out of it without making a mess. Okay, so you go through the drive-through and you get your order, and then you find out something interesting about your order. Not only was it very fast, it was also very soft. Okay, it was also, of course, very calorie rich. So essentially, we see everything about the modern environment and how food goes from the farm and then winds up in people's stomachs. It's going to turn out that this is going to be an extremely easy, energy conserving, very energy rich process of procuring energy for individuals. That's why we have the weight problem.
Yeah, it's incredible. The foods you mentioned, these high fat, high calorie, hyper palatable foods, they really, like, when I think of that, I think of like Cinnabon, for example. It's like 1,200 calories. They almost require no chewing whatsoever.
Almost no chewing. And it's going to turn out that that's the reason why you have orthodontists, is because little kids, if they don't have to chew their food, then they don't have to stress the jaw. And if they don't have to stress the jaw doesn't grow wide, and therefore there's not enough room for the teeth to go in. That is specifically why. I did that. I had to have braces. It turns out that a computer guy found that had my jaw, looking at my jaw, had my jaw been properly formed, it would have looked much more, the whole face would have looked much more like Brad Pitt.
See, so there's ramifications beyond our health and weight loss when we don't eat the proper diet. Yeah.
All right. So energy conservation. So where do we take this concept? It means that at the beginning, you're going to fumble and you're not going to be very good at it. And it's going to be frustrating, and it's going to be not very many calories and not a lot of pleasure out of those calories for a whole bunch of effort. See, so we have quite a formidable set of obstacles that is going to stop people from actually getting over these hurdles. But if you know that what's going to happen is that these hurdles are all going to get better, that you are going to, number one, your palate is going to become more sensitive to the lower density foods and you're going to like them better. That's an important thing for you to know. Number two, it's going to turn out that you are going to get more effective at actually getting the food put together. You want to keep things generally quite simple. As you go on in your journey, you can add things. That's why we have people like Chef AJ that can actually coach you in terms of getting more, a wider repertoire of food. But we want people to start simple. We want them to know of a few simple things that they can do essentially every day. And we want them to do those repeatedly so that they get their kitchen organized and get their life organized so that they essentially can start on this process. And that's what we need more than anything. Is most important part of the process is usually the first couple of weeks, where they need to really get themselves organized and do things in a repetitive enough fashion that they start to go up the learning curve and it starts to get easy. So that's step one. Energy conservation is it weaves its way through the chewing of food, it weaves its way through the ease of procurement, and it weaves its way through how it impacts the pleasure centers of the brain, that if the food is of higher calorie density, that it's more exciting and hyper excites the dopamine pathway. So energy conservation winds up being this very important principle that sits on the other side of the chessboard between you and your weight loss. Okay, it's the master of the chess game. So it's going to encourage you to eat the richer food, to get the food that's easy to get, and to stop you from going through the process of going up the learning curve to do things differently. It's the past master of the survival arts. And it's basically saying, don't do it, don't do it. okay? Don't do it. Don't go to the trouble. Don't get some list together. Don't chop a bunch of stuff. Don't get knives together. Don't get some Tupperware together so that you can save the food. Forget about it. Just go get something that's really rich and easy to chew that you don't have to think about. That's exactly what's sitting on the other side of your life's chessboard. You have to understand that that creature is there, that that creature is embedded in you. It's an ingenious device to save your ancestors from starving, okay? And unfortunately, that very same device, that very same coach, is now coaching us in exactly the wrong direction. So that's step one.
That's why I'm such a stickler, Dr. Lisle, for people who are serious to clean their environment, because even if they prepare the healthy food, that richer food that they have for their families, it's always going to call to them.
Yes. So these are, yeah, that's why cleaning your environment, getting your environment organized is the fight. It's 75% of the fight. Okay. Now we're going to talk about a second part of the fight. And we're not going to be comprehensive in this, but I want to introduce a concept for people that haven't heard it, and just get a very significant component of their understanding sort of stoked, because this is very important. What we seek is we seek a feeling in life that's called happiness, and this has a mythical aspect to it. Like, oh, there's going to be some place like Shangri-La, or where it's all just happy all the time and somehow laced with pleasure too. Somehow this is just this magnificent, moment if we can capture it. That's a misunderstanding of what happiness is. What happiness is it's a signaling device to tell you that things are in good circumstances. That's what happiness is. It's exactly the same kind of signal as the hunger drive, thirst, temperature regulation. It's all emotions and all sensations are simply devices to signal to us whether circumstances are good or bad or somewhere in the middle. So if I've got a wood table here at the desk, if I were to sniff it right now, which I'm not going to do, I would not have any response. I might actually even be able to smell the wood a little bit, probably couldn't, but if I did, it wouldn't be strongly positive smell. It would be a little bit positive, but it wouldn't be anything like, for example, the smell of a ripe peach. And that's because the smell of a ripe peach, that smell is a sensation that is indicative of calories that I can really use. If I were to smell, if my cat had sat here and then I smelled some cat poop, which is
Lovely.
okay. But the point is, if I did, I wouldn't like that smell, because that smell is the smell of bacteria that's potentially harmful. So sensations are either positive, negative, or if they're neutral, it's because they're neither here nor there in terms of your survival reproduction. The peach is very good for my survival and reproduction. It increases my likelihood of survival. The cat poop decreases my likelihood of survival, okay? And the smell of the wood is in the middle. So our feelings, our moods of happiness or unhappiness, or our sensations of pleasure or pain, what these are is they're simply signaling devices that tell us whether or not we're in good circumstances or bad circumstances. And not only do they do this, they're also very sophisticated in terms of attempting to signal to us what aspect of the environment it is that is either in trouble or good. So when I smell cat poop, I don't suddenly feel anxious as if I'm being stalked by a predator, okay? It's a different negative feeling. I don't suddenly, or if I smell a peach, I don't suddenly fall in love, okay? In other words, your feelings are sophisticated. They're signaling devices to tell you not only is something good or something bad in your environmental circumstances, but how it's good and how it's bad. So it's going to turn out that what human beings want very much is a feeling that we're going to call esteem. It's a feeling of being valued. There's many good feelings in the world, like eating that peach or soaking up warm sunshine or looking out at a beautiful vista or hearing birds sing. There's a lot of things that can cause people to feel like, hey, I'm in good circumstances. But the most important one that people seek the most is a feeling that other people value them. That's because more of human survival and reproductive variance is dependent upon what other people think of us than anything else. So if I'm a gopher, that's probably not true. What counts most is, did I get the gopher hole deep enough to keep my kids away from the foxes, okay? So gopher feeling is probably more dependent upon the gopher hole. Human feeling also depends upon your environmental circumstances, but the most important part of those environmental circumstances are, what does the village think of you, okay? So we're designed by nature with what I'm gonna call an esteem meter. Esteem meter, I'm not just making this up, it's been called sociometer by Mark Leary at Duke University. It goes by other descriptions in history. A big one would be what we would call Freud's ego. So I don't like using Freud's ego too much because it comes with so much baggage from other ideas in Freudian psychology that it becomes instantly convoluted. But let's just use it for a minute, like the word ego. And we're going to put that aside, and we'll go back to using the concept of an esteem meter. It's a device that tells you what other people think of you based on what it is that, how it is that they're behaving. So if you apply for 5 jobs and you get them all, you come home and you tell your mom, boy, that was sure good for my ego, okay? What that meant was a bunch of different organizations esteemed you, and they signaled their esteem for you by what, you know, they found you valuable and they wanted to trade with you, okay? Or a young guy asked 5 girls to the prom and all 5 of them turned him down. And he comes home and tells his mom, boy, that was tough on my ego. And what that meant is that he did not get good esteem signals from those 5 young ladies. All of them rejected him. So essentially, the process is one of acceptance or rejection. And when we are accepted, we're receiving esteem, and that creates moods of happiness inside of people. And when we get rejected, we feel depressed. We feel essentially it's bad for our biology. We got kicked out of the village, or we got rejected as a partner, or is it a friend, or is it a trade person? In other words, any of these sorts of relationships that make up human life, we are sensitive to cues about whether or not we are being accepted or rejected. This is what I call esteem, and it's the center part of life. Now, we also use another term other than ego. We call it self-esteem. So if the guy goes and gets those 5 job offers, he says, boy, that's good for my self-esteem. He'll use the word self-esteem pretty much interchangeable with the word ego, okay? Now, I don't, and there's a reason why I don't. And I'm going to be battling this the rest of my life as I try to get people to use the language the way I want them to use it. And that is that I want us to be conscious of the fact that there are 2 different esteem processes. One of them is esteem coming from the outside, about what other people think of us and how they signal whether or not they value us. That's what I call esteem. That is not self-esteem. That is esteem. Those people are the ones that esteem you, okay? And they are esteeming you and you feel good. It causes you to feel good. You are not esteeming you. They are esteeming you, and they are signaling it, okay, with their behavior. That is the loudest signal that there is inside of human nature. There is nothing more tantalizing and nothing more satisfying than have other people signal to us that they find us valuable and that they want to include us and accept us in their lives. That's what falling in love is someone that you find really valuable finds you really valuable. There's no more intense positive experience than that. Okay? We have many of those experiences where it doesn't have to be with people, it could be with our animals. So when our animals interact with us, they signal to us that they love us, and we signal it back, and there's a reciprocal process of esteem signaling to everybody's esteem meter, okay? Now, when we go on a weight loss journey, we are seeking esteem. We want other people to think more highly of us. Maybe because we're overweight, they think we're not very conscientious or not very smart or not very emotionally stable. So they have a bunch of negative stereotypes. They also think we're not very physically attractive. And so there's a lot of negatives that we carry into the social world as a result of being overweight. Yeah, and so therefore we're motivated. We know that this is costly. And so guess what? Our motivational system says, maybe we should spend some time and energy in trying to fix this, okay? And so we have to go against the pleasure trap. We have to go against energy conservation programming, but we feel the motivation. And the motivation that is driving us is our imagination as we say, boy, would my esteem meter love to have positive feedback from other people. That's what we seek. That is the goal that human beings are seeking when they start their weight loss journey. Now, what I try to do as a psychologist is I attempt to get people to alter this goal. Because what I want them to do is I want them to discover that there is another source of esteem built inside of human nature. That source of esteem is going to be what I call the internal audience. Now, the internal audience doesn't have an easy name that fits. So in the history of philosophy, they'll call it consciousness or self-conscious. Freud sort of called it the superego to some degree. It starts to be muddy. The modern neuroscience hasn't come up with a universal name for this, but I have a name that I think works very well, and that's an internal audience. And what that internal audience is it's essentially a set of observers that are made up inside your own mind that are watching you. And you can see this all the time. So you see a little kid shooting baskets in his driveway, and he's calling the game as if thousands of people are watching him. And he'll say, you know, Jimmy goes back for the shot, you know, and he's calling it as if, and then when the crowd roars, he pretends the crowd is roaring. This is his internal audience. His internal audience is watching him. When you decorate your home and you make it look nicer, you're looking at it, and what's looking at that home is your internal audience. And your internal audience is commenting to you, okay? And it's commenting through the esteem meter. It's sending you an esteem cues just as if it's real live people on the outside. And it will say, what a beautiful home. And you'll feel what? Proud, just as if real people said it, okay? This is an extraordinary characteristic, and I'm sure utterly unique to humans. That this device that I call an internal audience has been seen as a curse and pesky and something nasty that we have to fix or that we can program through happy talk. In other words, people will say, well, look in the mirror and really say with meaning, you know, you're a beautiful person. This won't work. The internal audience is way too smart, folks. You don't bluff the internal audience. The internal audience is watching you and knows everything about you. So it's watching everything you do. I mean, this is the ultimate Santa Claus. It knows whether you're sleeping and knows whether you're awake and knows whether you've been bad or good, okay? It's watching the whole thing. And it's there to actually give you a signal into your future as to what other people would think if they were to see what you're up to. So that's the point of it. So the point of it is that if your house is a mess and you start to clean it up and it starts looking better, your internal audience says, hey, this is looking better. And if they saw what it looked like now, they would say you're doing a good job. Okay? This is if a gal tries on a dress at Macy's, and she's looking at it in the mirror, she's looking at it through the eyes of her internal audience. She doesn't care what she looks like. She's not attracted to herself. Like, what difference does it make? You're not looking at yourself. No, other people are looking at you. And so your internal audience is the one that's looking at you. And it's looking at you and it's giving you feedback as if it's outside people. And if it thinks that that dress looks good on you, it says, hey, that looks good. This is what we call self-esteem. This is entirely generated from within your own mind. And so it's a funny thing because it's kind of not you that's doing it. It's somebody else. It's these mythical people. But it's your neural tissue. It's you. But it's watching. This is why people can have very funny language. They'll say like, I'm so disgusted with myself, or I'm so mad at myself. Really? How's that possible? That's telling us right there that there's more than one social psychological entity inside the person's brain. And that's what it is. The internal audience watches you do something and it says, that's disgusting. What a lousy job you did. But that's what it is. It's an outside entity commenting. Now, when it comes to weight loss, this is such a long journey. It's such a journey against your instincts. It's against the energy conservation programming. And if you're going to make esteem from other people the goal of doing this, it's probably not going to work very well.
Wow.
Okay? So even though esteem is, of course, the ultimate goal that we're seeking, the truth is, if we make it, if it is the conscious directed goal to this entire thing, then we're going to miss out on the most important part of the process. And we're going to be a little bit lost. So let me tell you what happens to people. People will, through great self-discipline and determination, often lose 40 or 50 pounds and look much better. But once they start to get esteem cues from other people, that other people say, wow, Sally, you look really good. Wow, you look great. Okay. Then they start thinking, let me now refigure my energy conservation programming. Let's now start thinking about this. I think I can have a chocolate bar now, and it's not going to make much difference as what I look like. So now I've just enhanced my day because I now just got this self-indulgent 400 calories. But nobody saw. My husband didn't see. My friends didn't see. The cute guy at work didn't see. Nobody saw. Okay? I got away with it. All right? So I still have the same esteem that I had earlier today before I did this. And what we noticed, though, is that the self-esteem says, well, that was pretty mediocre. But it's quiet. The self-esteem audience is not loud, folks. It's meant to be quiet. It's a quiet coach and audience. It's considered by some other schools of psychology to be inherently punitive and inherently critical. It's actually called by one group the internal critic. This is incorrect. It's actually an audience. And so if you do a good job, it will give you a thumbs up. And if you do a bad job, it will give you a thumbs down. That's how it works. And the feelings that go with that are the esteem feelings, because that's the device that it's operating through, because it's essentially social psychological entity sending esteem cues. So if you do a very fine job, there will be a quiet applause. It's not going to be loud. It's not as loud as the cute guy at work saying, wow, what have you been up to? That's an esteem cue. That's real live people signaling real live esteem. That's the music is on full blast. That's like the amplifier for a guitar player, okay? A self-esteem, the internal process, is more like he's picking at that guitar with no amplifier. It's very quiet. Nobody can even hear him. It's just in his garage or in his room, and he's going through the fingering. But if he hits those fingers really well and he practices hard and he learns a new sequence, he feels really good about himself. That's self-esteem.
So it's almost like you're saying that your internal audience is never not looking. And with every bite you take, they're either cheering you or booing you.
Yes, or neither, you know, because it's not, your performance is fine and it's not wowed by your performance and it's not disgusted. You're doing a decent job, okay? This is the self-esteem mechanism. And this is the mechanism that people need to become sensitive to and understand how it works. So we can't talk it into anything. All it's doing is it's watching our actions. Okay, it's a beautiful judge. Now, so what I need people to do is I need them to understand that the self-esteem mechanism is dynamic. This is why I call my approach to psychology esteem dynamics. It's because we've been taught that our self-esteem is entrenched, that it happened in early childhood. Freudian psychology would say that it's set in stone in early childhood interactions with our parents. It turns out this is a huge mistake. That's like saying you ate a big meal once and you're never going to be hungry again, or you got cold once for a week because you got trapped up in Alaska and now you can never get warm again. It's you just can't get warm enough. That isn't how it works. Esteem processes are inherently dynamic. Every sports hero knows this. 1 minute they're the hero, the next minute they're the GOAT, 15 minutes later or 15 weeks later they're a hero. Changes. Esteem processes are dynamic. And the self-esteem process is dynamic. And the hardest battle of weight is actually the self-esteem mechanism watching you. And if you, and essentially the suffering that a person is doing because they're coming into the problem of losing weight with a self-esteem mechanism that is disgusted. The self-esteem mechanism is disgusted with a person who wants to do a better job and isn't doing it. And the self-esteem audience simply watches this and watches behavior that is in the pleasure trap, that isn't taking the time and energy and the actions to do things properly, even though they know the right direction to go. And the self-esteem mechanism isn't, the internal audience isn't that sophisticated to know how hard this is. And so it can be pretty punitive and it can be a pretty unpleasant place to live inside your own house with your self-esteem mechanism giving you thumbs down every day.
Wow.
And people look to shrinks, they look to psychodynamic thinking, they look to where they've had abusive situations in their past, they look to all kinds of explanations to try to slash the Gordian knot of confusion as to why it is that their self-esteem is so low. Okay? My message here is to explain that the self-esteem mechanism is inherently dynamic. And if you take the bull by the horns and you do this in the direction that you and I, AJ, try to coach people to do, that the self-esteem mechanism can turn around, and it can turn around very, very fast because it's dynamic. So it won't turn around in a day, because one day isn't enough to impress yourself. Your audience is not going to be impressed in a day. In 2 days, it's not going to be impressed. It's not going to believe in you. But in 5 or 6 days, it starts to believe. So if you do an excellent job for 5 or 6 days in a row, and I don't mean a pretty good job, but you do an excellent job for 5 or 6 days in a row, your internal audience starts to take notice. It starts to know that you had many times when you could have gotten indulgent and gotten back into the pleasure trap, but you didn't do it. Okay? And it thinks, wow, Sally, you mean business? Maybe. Okay? Now, it can still get overwhelmed looking in the mirror and feel like, oh, what's the use? What's the point? The success is so far off, etc. But what we want to do is we want to have people focused on happiness. And I want you to know that there's 2 ways to happiness. One way is through the self-esteem mechanism, and the other way is through the esteem mechanism. We want to park the esteem mechanism. It will come. If it's not coming today, and it's not coming next week, and it's not coming the week after that, and it's not coming the week after that. Because this is a long-term trap, and you've been in it a long time, and to unwind the mess, this is like having a house that's a mess. We're not going to have it cleaned up in 8 minutes. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to take a while, okay? And to clean up this mess is going to take a while. And we're going to need support, okay? And we're going to need education, and we're going to need to go up the learning curve. But most of all, what we need to know is we need to know that within 2 weeks, our self-esteem can be very high, okay? And therefore, we can get to happiness a hell of a lot faster than we're thinking. And once you've tasted this, once you know what it feels like to have your self-esteem mechanism say, hey, I'm doing really well, okay? You are doing a good job, Sally. You are doing a really good job. Now, if you run and measure to the scale, we could get into trouble. Because it could be that you're down 2 pounds and you're like, oh, what's the use? I'll never get this esteem. I've got 80 pounds to go. I don't want people doing that. I want them looking at their esteem process. I want them having a simple set of fundamentals that they know they need to do every day, the things that you talk about in your groups. We want to have simple processes that we go over, and when we do them at the end of the day, and while we're doing them during the day, our internal audience is watching us. And when you go to sleep that night and you wake up the next morning and you didn't indulge, The internal audience says, you put together another perfect day, okay? You do that 10 days in a row, folks, and you have happiness. How about that? We can get there way faster than the 6 months it's going to take to lose the 50 pounds. And when we get there, we will know what got us there, which was the self-esteem mechanism. Honoring that and protecting it and wanting to have that feeling of having done things well and done it right, okay? That's the most important magic that there is in this process. Of course, once the crowd cheers and the confetti comes down and you win your happiness trophy from Esteem, you will have those moments. But folks, that's not as important as we think it is. When they win a Super Bowl and there's confetti, the young men that have done this are extremely proud and they are very happy to have won. But if you had told them, guess what, you can buy a Super Bowl trophy if you're rich for $100,000, just go buy a trophy. Like, what is that? Okay, that's not the same thing. What we're looking for is the happiness that's generated from a self-esteem process where you earned it. That's what makes it special. Okay?
It seems like if somebody were to have gastric bypass, they really kind of bought the trophy. They didn't really earn it.
They bought the trophy. And the truth of the matter is they won't defend it, which is why it's such a mess. This is why I call all of this the slow, fast way. Okay? This is, we're only going to do this once. We're going to do it right. We're going to be paying attention to the right things, which is the self-esteem processes that give us a thumbs up when we do well and give us a thumbs not so up when we don't do so well. So you make mistakes along the way. That's okay. You're going to slip and fall sometimes as you're learning to walk. But as you learn the dance of self-esteem, then you're going to know how to always find your way back and how you're going to want to defend it. Okay?
This makes so much sense, Dr. Lisle. When I think about it, I'm 7 years into losing 50 pounds. And, for the first 2 years, people do give you lots of compliments. Oh my God, but it doesn't go on forever. And
Yes.
if it wasn't for these internal processes that you talk about, I think that's what keeps me motivated, because it's so funny because I didn't know you were going to talk about this, but I remember last night I've eaten dinner with you and you always leave food on your plate. And so does my husband, Charles, because you guys have really sensitive satiety mechanisms. And I came from the full plate cub. And even though it doesn't affect my weight, I have a tendency to sometimes overeat or eat later than I want. But when I don't do it, which was last night, I remember brushing my teeth last night, like having what I think of as a perfect day where I didn't overeat and I remember saying to myself, God, I feel really proud going to bed tonight because I'm not overly stuffed and bloated. And I think these quieter processes, these are much more sustainable, because after you lose your weight, it's not going to be forever where people are going to every day at work compliment you.
Absolutely. This is what this is all about.
Yeah, it seems like after learning calorie density, the littlest known secret to weight loss is to impress your internal audience.
Yes, you bet.
Yeah, this is mind blowing.
Yes, there's three. There's many folks that can help us. So my favorite place to send people if they want to join a group and get group support is your group, AJ.
Oh, thank you.
It's not weight loss. Chef AJ is one of a kind when it comes to organizing and orchestrating group process. If you are somebody that needs to get away and just take a break and have essentially a retreat, obviously True North is where we are, but it's hard to get into. But Dr. Nathan Gershfeld now in Southern California has Fasting Escape at fastingescape.com, which is a beautiful facility where people can come and take a time out and really get their palates reset through a period of water fasting or juice fasting to get them on their way. And when it comes to one-on-one counseling, I don't know anybody better than Vanessa Sardi at Nutriception, who I just met in this last year, is a terrific individual for supporting people's self-esteem on a one-on-one basis. So this is one of many. There's a lot of good support systems out there, and people are finding them here on this summit, I'm sure. These are three of my favorites. But however the process goes, I want everyone to be alerted to their internal audience and to understand but this is not a pesky negative thing that is a curse of humanity. Now, believe me, it's been painted that way, and you can beautifully see why people would feel that way. They would feel like, boy, do I not like the negative messages I'm getting from my internal audience. Can't you help me get rid of these? Okay? So here is a phrase that is disturbing. I need to be happy with myself just the way I am. Well, a person that's 40 pounds overweight that is attempting to have their internal audience be okay with them being happy the way they are is wishing for something that will never be, okay? Because the internal audience knows that you could do better, and it knows when you are not doing a good job, and it will continue to signal its irritation and frustration as it knows that you're undermining your biological success and ultimately your esteem, the esteem that you could be gaining. It won't give it to you. It doesn't matter how many times you stare in the mirror. It doesn't matter who hypnotizes you. It doesn't matter how many people sit around in a group and chant to try to get you to feel better about yourself. It won't work. Self-esteem is pitiless in its judgment, okay? If you earn it, it's going to give it to you. It's going to give it to you. If you earn it, and it's a beautiful thing and there's nothing like it. If you don't earn it, it's not going to give it to you. And so the beauty of this is that it does not take spectacular success from the world to give you self-esteem. All it takes is for you to do an excellent job in an intermediate term situation in a matter of days, and your self-esteem will turn around and you will continue to have that self-esteem for as long as you earn it.
That's incredible. This is something I'm going to have to listen to over and over because it's just mind-blowing. So just to summarize, Dr. Lisle, what is the real truth about weight loss?
Truth about weight loss is that it's a very important thing for people to do. It's important for both their self-esteem and their esteem. The price that's paid by being overweight and out of shape isn't just a few little health issues. It actually goes down deeper than that into the nature of our happiness. And the truth is that anyone can do this. So no matter how lost a person is or how hopeless they have felt, what we need is new information, new ideas, and support that gives you better insight into how it is that you can solve this problem. This problem is solvable. There are many obstacles, but it's very much like learning to walk. If you're determined enough and it's important enough to you, this success can be yours.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisle.
It's a pleasure, AJ.